and Unreal Engine.
Being recorded.
Hi guys,
Photo.
sorry I'm
Hi.
late.
Hello.
Gonna plug in this.
Yeah.
Dini, where are you?
I'm in the UK.
Yeah, I know that.
I'm at a conference, and
Ah.
I'm in the middle of sessions, so I stole away to a cafe in the place so I can meet with you guys for an hour. Then I'm going to the keynote, and then I'm going to the reception, and then I'm teaching tonight at 9:30.
Okay.
International travel and internet
International
makes you work all the time.
Long days.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. I guess that means we should kind of jump right in. There's a few suggestions in our chat, but anything else first?
In your chat? In the chat?
I'm sorry, in our Slack chat.
Oh, Slack. Okay.
So Fabian and I had a very revealing session this morning where we found out that we're a lot more alike than we realized. And one of the things we decided to do from now on, including today, is to have a bit of a devlog. So whether it's this meeting or whether we have our morning meeting to go through technical things, instead of just having a video for you, Dini, it's more organized, it's more written, disagreements, proposed solutions, that kind of stuff.
So how are we alike and how are we different?
Fabian, you first. I can go if you prefer.
No, let me simmer a bit. The alikeness, from what I remember, was a profound dislike for inefficiency
and repetition.
And
Yeah.
repetition.
And different, I don't remember.
I think that I'm glad you don't remember, because I also don't. I think we don't have much of a difference. It's more that we're more alike. So we all of us agree that the demo experience needs to be polished and polished. How we do that, Fabienne and I had a different starting position, but I think we come to a very good conclusion. I like to be in a room and say, Fabienne, a little back, a little forward, that kind of stuff. And he find that as boring and as horrible as I find repetitions in the gym. So I get that 100%. So what we're going to do, we're going to schedule some sessions on those little tweak things. And since we have this devlog now, that means that once we've done something, because you, Dini, also absolutely don't like to repeat things, and I completely agree, we can point back to it. And we know why we did certain things. So yeah, that's kind of exciting. Let me just see here. So I've also put together a link that's in our Slack on some suggestions for design notes. But one of the things that Fabian and I also discussed this morning is we haven't actually decided on a name for this project, like a proper name that will be shown when people log in. It's not going to be authoring for Sloan or something like that. What do you think, Dini? Or should it be that? Maybe it should.
I thought it was the future of text and XR.
That's the project, but I don't think that's really the experience. Or is it?
Doesn't matter. Whatever. What do you think it should be?
I honestly have no idea, and I don't think we should spend forever on it. But when you go into the environment now, it says spatial scaffolding on the ceiling. So we have to decide on something kind of short and snappy that, because the language is important. I mean, I don't talk to anybody outside of our circle about XR. I talk about headset, right? So what is an approachable name? We can tell our friends and colleagues, like, oh, you got to try it in the headset. Obviously, we would say what we're building, but I'm sure we have something more evocative.
Think about that on my flight home. That's the time.
I think, if I remember correctly, we had some ideas about like something, because I think, Dini, you mentioned a couple of times studying Greek vases, and so we're starting to like jam on mythology and name like this, or if there is deity related to scholar work, maybe some kind of name around that.
For the words that have kind of popped up, it's like Erdos. There's Erdos, which is work.
Mhm.
So that's a word that Espen Arseth uses in cybertext, ergodic. So
Yeah, ergotic literature, yes.
but I'll go back and look at some ideas and see what I can come up with. I'll do that on my way home.
Cool. Cool. Okay. So then, if you please click on the link in Slack, I'll put it in our chat here too. Sorry, there's
Link in Slack.
boom. It's also here now. So let's just, there aren't that many items, so I'm sure we can go through it and see what we agree on. Are we all on that page?
Yes.
Cool. So the point of this, really important to clarify, this is for the in-person demo where one of us is there. It is not for someone going to the website and just diving in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So under general, I have 2 points. Yeah, hide the console, unless that's you tap the wrist to see the code snippets, because it's part of the coding world, I would say. And finally, remove all instructions, because one of us will be there.
Okay.
Deafening silence.
No, I'm agreeing. That sounds good. I mean, well, how do you want me to respond?
No, that's cool. Well, we all have to think about it, so I'm just teasing you. Fabian, what do you think of that for now, for this?
That what will probably happen, which is not necessarily a problem, but I think we at least need to be aware of it, is that the system now allows us to demo part of the entire work, not everything, and it means we're going to have we're going to give different demos, because I'm going to give demos that are more for people who are at least interested into coding. They might not code, but just to give an example, the first demo I give during the year to Lubos, his own suggestion, and I think we can see from the video that it's not me who suggested it, was like, oh, I want to code in such an environment. I was like, oh, that's it. I don't remember. I don't think I said anything. I just like, okay. But he was into that. The thing is, it's biased because some of my friends are developer. He's a researcher, but he also developed for that research. But it means it would make no sense for me to give a demo to him and not show the capabilities related to coding, especially if that's what he wants.
But Fabian, this doesn't preclude that at all.
No, it's not. I'm not saying it does. I'm just saying that you will do this. You will have no instruction and no console, but I will not. So it means we're going to give 2 different demos to 2 different crowds or audiences. It's not necessarily a problem. I'm just saying we need to be aware of it.
So are you saying that when you give a demo, it's not a reasonable thing in terms of the flow for the user to tap their wrist to get the console? Because I'm not saying we should get rid of the console.
It's not impossible to do it. It's just that if people are developers and they see a console, they see it as something that is positive, not threatening or negative.
Can I ask a question? Is it possible to have several different types of demos? So for example, a newbie who's not familiar with VR that needs a little bit more explanation, one that's maybe for an academic that has been using VR that would be looking to incorporate it in their work. I mean, there could be different scenarios.
That's already the case. That's why I meant that we're going to give different demos.
Yeah.
Again, it's nothing negative. It's just that because we'll be different people with different audiences, some of that audience will indeed be, let's say, VR newcomers, and they need a lot more hand holding and all the information everywhere on the hands and everywhere. but others will be experts, actual
Yeah.
experts in VR, and they will not even appreciate to have instruction on how to pinch because for them it's second nature.
Well,
So
maybe also, Fabian, there might be people that are interested in our process that would want to see everything. Like they want to see the snippets of code. They want to see
Yeah.
it's like, this is what's looking like now. So they want to see a process image. So I think
yeah.
you're absolutely right. There's probably going to be like 3 to 5 different scenarios.
So it's the case right now that the system allows to define a series of steps in the demo. And then you can adjust them a certain way. You can like skip steps or whatnot. So yeah.
Does that make sense, Photo?
Kind of. The thing is, it's great that we have these different demos in a sequence, but I am worried about having demos kind of in parallel because we absolutely, even for non-programmers, we want to show the console, we want to show the code snippets. There's no question about that. And so what I think would actually be a better compromise would be we do exactly as I say, because obviously that's great. We have the very first one, the 0, room, with just the hands and very little. However, in room 2, so to speak, we have exactly what Fabienne is talking about. So Fabienne could then skip ahead to room 2. So instead of in parallel, it's just the early ones may not be appropriate for all users. That should hopefully lead to less complexity. What do you think?
I don't understand what that's required to give the same demo to different people with different abilities.
It's a matter of presentation. I think that if on our page where we have all the demos, if we have like one that's called newbie intro, might as well just call it that, right? I would
Right,
probably show that.
yeah, but
Sorry?
if there is such a thing as newbie intro, and I'm not showing it to a newbie, why would I show that to that person?
You skip it.
Testing. And we teach usability testing in our program. We have a course called 478. And we don't make the same demo for every testing. So we have different scenarios. So if we're going out to the public, we have like, these people don't know what the hell we're talking about. Here's the demo, right? Then we have demos for people that are really savvy. Because we want really in-depth information. The people that don't know anything, it's like, what do you think? I mean, is this intuitive for you? That's the question we'd ask for them. A question for someone that's savvy is this a logical? It's a logical thing? What do you imagine should be next? So we can get more in-depth feedback from them, right? Because what we want is feedback. We're not show and tell. We're trying to get data.
I absolutely agree, Deanie, and I think I agree with Fabian as well. My only small suggestion is instead of having 2 different demo pages where we have 2 different sets of demos, because I'm afraid that this is actually to try to be for a bit, what, Fabian?
It's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting to have hundreds of different demos pages, and that's already the case now. We don't have hundreds, but we have at least 5, I want to say. Because also we're never going to give 2 different demos because the project now and a month ago and 3 months ago is totally different. So it's not just like cumulative demos or steps of demo over time.
But that's exactly my point. I don't think we should fork the demos, so to speak. I don't think we should have one for techies, one for newbies, etc. I think it also, in my brief experience doing a couple of demos, I don't know what I will show that person when we start because I don't know their level of excitement and so on. That's all. So all I'm suggesting is we do what you're talking about. We do the console, do this code snippet. Of course we do, absolutely no question. All I'm saying is, in addition, we have 1.0.0 top level that you can just skip. Right, and I will judge when I do it. Danny will judge when she's doing it whether we need that first one. Otherwise, we skip ahead because we have so many now that hardly ever will we be able to do the screen recording and the audio recording and the different backgrounds and all these things. So some of it will be ad hoc. So I think the 2 most important experiences will be the first and the last one. The last one being where they are when we ask them, so what did you think? And all of those other questions. That's what I'm thinking about.
To clarify, it's already too late to give a full-on demo unless people like super dedicated. But going through all the steps already takes like
Yes.
half an
Yes.
hour, an hour. It's already super long. But yeah, we can have the steps. One can think of it as a table of content. You can jump to whichever ones you want, and we can have a step at the beginning about without the console. We can have a step at the end dedicated to more feedback. It's not a problem.
Cool. Well, then we agree on absolutely everything, which is wonderful. Please click on the link that I just put in. So I'm not sure if you had yeah, of course you've seen this, Dini, right? This is the recorded demos. So what I've added on the bottom of this is in bold the demo experiences, but also a page for questions. And I think the three of us should write the questions today. I just have some placeholder. But if we please click on the demo experiences, this is the menu, of course, that Fabienne is talking about. And yeah, and I just think it's really, really good and useful. Because that's something Fabienne can update without having to deal with any of the other pages. And as it keeps working, it just gets better. So any comments on the curated demos page?
No, that's great.
Okay, so if we then go
think
and
that
click
is-
on a series of questions, that's probably best to do first before we look at the notes that I put in separately. The point of this page is someone's still in the headset. They're in an optimized room where they asked, what do you think, and so on. What should we do with these questions?
The first question I ask somebody when I'm showing the headset is, have you ever put a headset on before? Are you comfortable in a headset? And I get them to tell me what their comfort level is and how much experience. And that then tells me how much guidance they're going to need, right? And then
Can you repeat, Dini, I didn't hear you. Please repeat that last sentence.
I try to figure out where they are so I know how to guide them better, right? Survey makes no sense if they're not comfortable in the headset. And then the next thing I do, because I did this yesterday, right? And so the next thing I do is, okay, so now you have this on and tell me what you're tell me what you're seeing. What are you looking at? You know, I want to make sure they're seeing what I want them to see. Can you figure out what to do? Is it easy for you to, we usually ask them to do a series of activities. Okay, now I want you to open this. Now I want you to move here. Now I want you to do this. So I give them a series of directions, of things I want them to do. Then I ask them, was that easy to figure out? Was that easy to follow? Did that make sense? Now, step 2, you're inside, seeing what I want you to see. You know the basic, you access the basic elements. Now, I want you to start to think about, in our case, in this case, I want you to look at the documents in front of you and see if you can figure out if you can move text out of the document.
Yeah.
So give them another series of activities. Yeah.
So the way the page is structured already, each one of these things is a separate demo. So there is one for highlighting text that can do that sort of thing. So we should absolutely have questions for that done correctly in the way you're saying for that. And also we should absolutely have the initial questions. I've written them down. You can reload the page if you like. I think just because each one of those boxes, if we go back to, hang on, to Fabienne's page, we can write those questions there. So I think we should do that. But do you have any specific thoughts on what we should ask after they've gone through? Because that's kind of on a separate page.
Yeah. Is this something you would use? Are there things that you want us to do to make this more useful for you? Can you give us advice on who else we could show this to that might be interested in it? That makes sense?
Yeah, I'm just writing it down. So can you give us suggestions for who else? That can be, of course, when they take the headset off.
I want to know, like, was this intuitive? Was this an experience that you'd want to try again? Is this a one-off? Oh, this is cool. Thank you for showing me that. Or, oh, wow, I can see how to use this. Is this something you could use? And if so, what? How would you use it?
Yeah, can you have a look at the questions that are on here? Because some of them kind of covers that, so we can edit that.
Well, I haven't had a chance to look at them because I just saw them.
Okay. I've updated a little bit more based on what you said.
I don't see anything that I said.
Okay, let's make sure we're on literally the same page.
Well, I just clicked on the link that says questions.
The questions. Okay, so it says here at the
Oh, I
bottom,
see.
when out of the headset, can you give a suggestion as to who else we can show this to for feedback? And
But
then
I also said, was this something that you would use again? If
I have
so,
that's at the top. Have you used a headset before, and how comfortable are you?
no, when they're through, okay, now that you've done this, we've shown you how to use it for this particular purpose. Is there some way that you would imagine using it that's not this? Can you imagine applying this elsewhere? If so, what? Fabian has his hand up.
Yeah, it's pretty much for me the most important question, because it's that they like it or not. It's kind of it's important, but it's not as much as like what's the gap between what they have seen right now and what is actually useful for them. Maybe it's right there. Maybe we're missing a tiny piece. Maybe it's like so far out, we're off our rocker and we need something totally different. But it is indeed this. That's the most important in terms of also like getting new ideas and feature. Because if they were super sweet to us and like, wow, that was super cool, it's like,
That was fun.
yeah, it's very nice. It's good for my ego and all, but yeah, that doesn't get us going further.
But that's what the questions under the specifics are intended to be. So I can change them, of course, because we have what is missing for you to be able to author academic documents, are the specific ways you'd like to see information, and a few specifics like that. And remember, the questions we asked them before they put the headset on, during the specific demos, and after the headset is specific. I'm thinking here mostly, we're in a specific room at the end that is designed to have very few elements, just so they can stand and think. When I did the demo with Jesse, just before I took the headset off, I decided to ask these questions. I hadn't really done it before, and she was still looking around. So she was in the right mindset.
Yeah, you want to ask survey questions while they're in the headset and then after the headset.
Yeah.
So after they're out of the headset, are there suggestions that I've asked you a series of questions. Are there other things you want to talk about? Is there anything else you want to tell me about this experience? Suggestions you can give us. Is there someone you can recommend that we talk to that might be interested in this?
So I have the outside of the headset. Can you give suggestions to who to talk to? I don't think they need to be in the headset for that. So that's
No.
here.
No.
But under specifics, I have a few questions there. Should we edit them or add to them?
No, they're perfect.
Okay. And then under the general, then, am I covering what you guys want to have covered?
Can I ask a question?
course.
If we're showing this and we have our own questions we want to add, is that where we get in trouble?
No, well, no, of course not.
We get
But
mad at me?
no, of course not. But what I think we do need to do soon is to have a Google spreadsheet or something where we put these into, because some of them are numerical. Do you like A or B, so to speak? And we can start tally things up. How do you think that process should be done, Dini? Or should we just do it spoken while they're on the headset and transcribed? I don't know.
We actually have a tool at the university that we use called Qualtrics. We use Qualtrics.
Okay, so should we use that?
Yeah, we can use Qualtrics. The university is our sponsor. We can use whatever we want.
Qualtrics, right? And we will have access to this since you're talking about sponsor after we're done with Sloan and everything, right?
As long as I'm working at the university, I have Qualtrics.
Can you write that in the chat so I don't misspell it? Fabienne, you have a thing?
Yeah, I'm wondering in terms of methodology, indeed, like, are we starting to do quantitative or are we sticking to qualitative? If we're doing quantitative, we need one set of questions we don't strive away from. If we're doing qualitative, I'm not saying anything go, but it's a different way. I personally don't even know if we can scale in terms of how many people we interrogate to make it quantitative, and I'm not sure I'm very interested in it because again, when I'm doing Dutch demo, kind of the holy grail of what I'm really looking for is like, it's nice, but in order to actually author an XOR, I need XYZ. And even if it's nuts, I don't mind. But if it's like small adjustments, it doesn't get me going. I don't know if it's the right thing to say, but it's like, yeah, okay, cool, but yeah, it doesn't. I'm not like excited for that new crazy feature. So yeah, which way are we going there? Qualitative, quantitative, and if so, like it's kind of like what Dini was asking before. Is it a closed set of questions and we must stick to it, or is it more like inspiration and we try to be coherent, but it's kind of open-ended anyway?
Can I say something about that? The basic thing we're trying to do is gather data. And we're not trying to compare. I mean, when we have one set of questions that we ask everybody, we're trying to compare a series of objects. For example, let me give you an example. When we had the 4 candidates visiting us for that job interview, we had 3 set questions we asked every candidate. And we wrote the answers down and we could see how each one answered. And that would tell us how we would like that particular candidate. We're not comparing apples, right? We're not doing comparison. We're just gathering data. And in a gathering data methodology, you want to tease out every bit, you want to squeeze it dry. So we might have some basic questions like these, but things happen in the moment. There are things that occur that we need to like, oh, let me ask you about that. Oh, interesting. Let me try this. So we want to be able to squeeze all the data we can out of every demo and then document that, right? So I think it's fine to have these general questions because we're going to want to turn these into Sloan and say, these are our general questions. But I think in the heart of it, in the heat of the moment, the passion that happens, we're going to be asking other questions. We want to document those, but it doesn't have to be just these. Does that make sense?
I
Do you
think that
agree?
was. I think that is what Fabienne was angling for, and I
Yeah.
certainly agree with that. I
Yeah.
think we're on the same page. All I'm thinking about is there may be a few things like, do you like seating or standing, background or no background? Almost boring ones, but I don't think they should be our priority. Our priority should be to get inspiration for what to do next. I think I speak for all of us, right, on that.
Yeah, but I think it is important to ask if they like to stand or sit because that starts to tell us what our audience is wanting. All right. So I think it's not a bad question. It's not that interesting, but we have to ask it. There's questions we have to ask, baseline
Yeah.
questions. And then, but the more important questions are, you did this. Can you think of does that make sense to you? Is there a better way of doing that?
Hang on, I'm just writing a note on that.
I think question like standing or sitting is important. The problem I see is it's really hard to do it right. Because, for example, when I was in Paris, it was it was the middle of the room with the students around, and I did it standing, but they had a high table because this way I could put the keyboard on, and they also were able to put like the yellow bar on it. So it is standing, but it's probably not the standing that we have in mind. It's also not on a desk, but it's kind of a desk. And if we do have that question, then we need to really be mindful of the context when their answer is given, because if we give it in a very small room with a huge chair in the middle, I bet the person would prefer sitting. If it's cafe, I mean, there are so many parameters behind
Yeah.
this that we at least need to give some context before having the raw answer.
Yeah, Fabian, you've said many times, and you've been the one pushing for this kind of testing, and I'm so grateful many times that this is for inspiration for what to do next. So if we remember to ask a question like that and we encode it properly, standing, however, there was a different desk, blah, blah, blah. So the one I did with Jesse, I think was good because I could then afterwards put it in a page. And that's fine. I don't think we necessarily need a page of how many people prefer standing. It's a good additional piece of research, but key is for people to feel comfortable with us, comfortable in the environment. So we shouldn't be too medical about it. I think we all agree on that. So let's finish the question page then. What should we write? What should we edit? Let's knock it down, or not knock it down.
You've been doing that, right? I mean,
I know. Just more. I want more, Dini. I always want more.
you and
I'm
Elon
sure.
Trump, you and Elon Musk. Did you see him lose in Wisconsin?
Yes, I
Lost
did.
$25 million. He tried to buy votes. That is
Yeah.
not against the law. I don't even know. I mean, he should be in fucking jail, but he lost.
Yeah.
$25 million.
It,
I woke up happy for the first time. It's January 20th. I'm just saying. Sorry.
yeah. I have nothing to do other than shake my head.
Good day. It's a good day.
I'm just simplifying. So how do we feel about these questions?
Well, I wouldn't ask anybody about thinking cap. Finding what you might dream altering environment be when you put on. I wouldn't say it like that. I would say, when you're in this kind of experience, right? What else can you imagine happening? What can you imagine in this space that we haven't imagined yet? What do you think? I would never ask a question like that. Among ourselves, I would. I mean, that's how we talk, but I wouldn't do it to a stranger.
I mean, I do use the term. You can reload. I've edited it. I do use the term thinking cap because XR and VR are a bit kind of. Some people get the impression that we're pushing you should have this on all day. So I agree with your edit, Danny. I've changed it, but
Yeah.
in terms of just talking to them, just to say, hey, when you're doing this, blah blah. Yeah, Fabian.
Yeah, no, it's actually having it all day long. It's something we need to address. I think probably something to also add on top of the question, like kind of recommendation for demo. I don't know, are you fine with your hair or makeup or whatever? Are you comfortable? All this kind of as a reminder, because sometimes I rush through and I skip those steps and it's wrong. And having also a warning like this, like we don't intend you to spend the whole day in the headset, because it's crazy the amount of time where this is indeed implied. Like we're not trying to sell the headset, we're not trying to sell the software into it, we're not trying to trap you in there forever. But somehow, even like with rational, I want to say intelligent people, this kind of like fake debate starts, whereas like it's not even contentious, it's not a problem. So I think that there should be a place at the beginning of the question when we kind of, I guess, prepare ourselves mentally for this, because this is kind of nuts for me. It's like, why are people even suggesting this? That's never been the point.
You like the wording of this third point? I'm very happy to change it, but I'm trying to address what you said because it's important.
We can,
Yeah, go for it.
go ahead.
Maybe some like analogy like a blackboard or something like this. Not because you have a blackboard on the wall that you're supposed to use it all day long. It's nobody would ever suggest that. So I'm not sure how to convey it this way that it doesn't sound pedantic or some way, but it's like so obvious that you're not supposed to spend it there. Maybe it's like bad sci-fi rest remains.
Good idea. I've changed it. Dini, please go. I've added Blackboard, but Dini, what were you saying?
I forgot.
Do you like the sentence now? Oh, I should fix the grammar at least. Reasonable?
Yeah.
Should I also put a bullet point in there is that this is open and open source, or should we expect people to have been introduced to this?
Actually, it's interesting you mentioned this right now. I had that page that I put in the chat, which is the source code. I put it online right before the quarterly demo because I hate it when people say it's open source, but then it's like, oh, I don't want to put Peter on the spot last time. It's like, oh yeah, I need to improve this and that. Okay, but it's not open source if it's not available, like right the moment you say it. So I'm guilty of that too. And it's just using Peter because it struck me as an example like a couple of weeks ago. If it's open source, it's open source today, not tomorrow, because a lot of companies like say, yeah, it will be open source, and it never happens. So it is open source. It is right there with a license. I know that Dini, you had a GitHub account that I published to last year. I can do that there, no problem. There is at least this version there that is available with the right license. If we need it elsewhere, just let me know. We can link there, otherwise if need be. And we can also discuss like how often that needs to be updated. Because yeah, in practice, they can have access to it live. So they can also access the code live because there is nothing compiled or encrypted. But there is, yes, there is, it's there basically. If people also want to contribute to it, it's there because that's something I forgot, I think, to share. And it did not materialize, but when I was in Paris, the assistant of the professor there was suggesting that he wanted to contribute code to it. I was like, wow, that's great. Please do. But it's the first time that actually somebody said that. So I was happily surprised. So I can also follow up to him, but it means, yeah, potential external contribution to the source code, which in terms of, let's say, KPI for external body validating, let's say, the grant, I think that's usually something that is really appreciated. But yeah, if I don't know if you want to link there.
It's there. It's there. I've added it. Please reload. Absolutely important. Dini, please.
Fabienne, going back to your question, I'd like to see it on the other GitHub too. And the reason why we do that is because if something happens to your GitHub or to you, we won't have it. So the official site is that GitHub site that is going to be part what we're going to put into Sloan zone. So it doesn't matter if we have two right now, but the official one will have to be the one that is the university one, which is the GitHub that we built earlier. But keep yours, keep working with yours and just cart it over when you're.
Oh, I will, because GitHub is Microsoft. I don't like Microsoft, so I will have my copy anyway there. But I understand also in terms of, let's say, contractual thing. So if whenever I have the right access to it, I'll push on GitHub too. No problem.
That's great. Yeah, don't get me started on Microsoft.
Oh, they're such softies. They're so sweet. I have a request. What do you guys think of the term liquid space for this? Because Fabian wants everything to be editable. I want workflow to be smooth. Dini wants Fabian and me to be happy.
I don't. I don't want anybody to be happy.
So why do you make me happy then? Come on, you find a different. Sorry, there's an animal on my drink. Not trying to make me happy.
Well, liquid is also part of your product already, and I think it would be associated with it. I think it'll be misleading. I don't think people understand what liquid space means. They're gonna think it's a bath, water.
Liquid, yes. I've actually honestly forgot that I have the product Liquid. Of course I do. It was actually my first product as well.
Yeah,
And
Liquidizer
it,
is one of your email addresses.
yeah, no, yes. But Liquid goes back to the philosophy from the mid 90s of liquid information, where
Yeah.
you should be free in your information and your information should be free. The product, Liquid, is free anyway. It's just, and it's not promoted anymore, but I accept your point on that. But it should
Yeah.
be, the name should be something evocative of when you put this on, you are in a something like a liquid space. But I mean, I love scaffolding because oh, by the way, I hope you all saw the picture of Jessie pointing to the scaffolding side. I think it's the first time she's seen that sign in the world live. It was on a bridge in London. Anyway, we can keep thinking about that. Are we good with the questions then?
Yeah,
Or
that
should
sounds
we
good.
edit further?
That's fine.
To be
Right.
clear,
So,
yes, but we will edit it further, like in a month, in 3 months, whenever we do a new demo. It's kind of an excuse also to update that page. So, but for now, yes, and I think it's useful to have it. So, thanks for putting it there.
yeah, no, I agree. This needs to evolve. Right. So let's please click
Well,
through
let
on
me ask a
the,
question. Are you happy?
am I happy?
Have I made you happy?
I am so happy with the way the project is going at the moment. It's actually a bit weird. So, yes, you made me happy.
Oh, I'm so
Uh,
glad.
well, no, we've gotten to a point where when there's differences of opinion, no, sorry, differences of perspective, like Fabienne and me this morning, we had very, very different perspectives. And I think a year ago, we would have gotten really annoyed at each other. But, we just like, okay, let's step a little bit back. It's like, what are you actually saying? And then we found out the similarities. We found a solution, at least for now. What could be better in a project? So yeah, I'm very, very happy. Okay, let's see if you can make me ecstatic. Let's click on this next link. I'm not saying that should be your goal, Fabienne.
Can I tell you something? Women are trained to make our life focused on making men happy. That's why I laugh about it. It's like my whole life is dedicated to make everybody happy. I want to make everybody happy. And then you don't, right? And then it's like, oh my God, I totally fucked up my life. I didn't make anybody happy. I'm a loser.
There is a lot of there is
Stress
a
on.
lot behind that. No question.
That's true.
So, have you guys heard of the TV series Adolescence?
Yeah.
I watched it.
Yeah.
We've only seen the first episode, and Emily couldn't stand seeing more, so she went on Wikipedia to read the story. So now we're going to watch it. What do you think, Fabian?
Yeah, I liked it. It shouldn't exist, but yeah. One little technical detail about that. I don't know if you noticed, but it's
Yes.
no cut.
It's what?
No cut. It's one shot per episode. And
Fabian, do you not know that I'm basically a walking camera? I've studied all the shots and the technology, and it's amazing what they did.
I will not spoil it, but I realized at the end of the second episode that it was no cut, and that it happened at a very specific, right before a very specific moment, where you will have a little like what the heck moment. So yeah, I mean, again, without even thinking about the technical aspect, it is sadly important, I guess, to watch. But on top of that, the how it's been shot, it's it's impressive.
Yeah, right. Let's look at this page before we go down that very important rabbit hole. So
I want to mention I'm going to leave a little bit before 5 o'clock so I can go to the keynote address. So we'll go through this and then I'll get ready to go.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Danny, when are you back in the capital?
I was going to go back on Tuesday, but Wendy Hall can't meet except on Zoom. So it makes no sense for me to take the train down to Southampton to
Where
Zoom
is
with
she?
her.
Where is she in the
I
world?
have no, I didn't ask. So I'm gonna go back on Monday. I'm going back, I'm gonna see you on Sunday and then I'm go back on Monday. And then I'm back on campus for all the chaos that's happening right now. Things are unfolding in a jet speed that I can't even, man, I can't even explain to you.
Yep. Right. Okay. Right. Let's look at this. So these are the things that I would like. See if you agree. It's written from a very personal perspective, and if we agree, great. If not, we edit. Actually, may I please suggest we go to the very bottom because the top ones are easy to discuss. We only have 12 minutes of Dini time. The final room. That the final room is designed for. That's where someone is just standing while we ask them questions.
So we're calling them rooms instead of spaces.
Oh,
I-
that's just me being ridiculous.
I'm not picking on you. I'm just saying, is that, we're terminology, is that gonna be our terminology?
What do you think? I'm happy to go whatever way. It just happened to be the word I used because we seem to enter and leave.
I like to think of space so we can
Okay.
get away from skeuomorphic ideas. I mean, I'm just saying, Fabienne, what do you think?
To me, it's even more abstract. It's a step. It's not even a space or a room. It's because it's one set of explorations, not even feature. So to me, it's a step.
Yeah, if you say room, people have expectations of what a room looks like. If you say space, it's so generic. They won't come thinking I have a desk, I have a bed,
Fine,
a kitchen sink.
fine. Yeah, I've changed it to step. That's okay, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
One,
So-
just to step back a tiny bit is
Uh-huh.
we're not necessarily going to when I read this, I worry a little bit, for example, because I see the knowledge object citation card as if we will keep on showing this in 6 months.
No. This is all editable. Okay.
Okay.
You know what? Because we have little time with Dini, the substantial work, which is where we're going. This goes back to a discussion Fabian and I have had on. I talked about theater and make people be impressed, and he had the impression that I was talking about some visual Hollywood effect thing. I'm not. I'm talking about an interaction which we all agree with. So what I think we should do, not necessarily right now, is the final room where we talk to them to distill it down to a few objects and a really special interaction. What is written here is just a suggestion for that. But so everything else is gone.
Can we
Because
use, instead of, since we're still talking about different types of shapes, can we say knowledge objects as small shapes? And then put i.e. cubes, circles. I mean, because we don't know what they're gonna be, right? In configuration with the ability to move them into space, see connections, and expand for the user to read the object. Okay. That's my main consideration. It's just small shapes, i.e. cubes, triangles. I mean, it could be anything, right? And that came from our last conversation, which I thought was very fruitful.
yeah, edited, saved. Right. So the discussion we had on Monday, which is around local interactions. I want someone, because now that I've done Tom and Jesse, stood in front of them, and they're real human beings whom I respect, who are clever people, kind of in our field. I want to be able to say something to them like, okay, now you can do this. And I want it to be visceral. I want it to be a gesture based. And I think I know I'm preaching to the choir. Right? So that is why the notion of expanding and collapsing things might be good. But this is something I think we can talk further along.
As far as the discussion items, I'd like to see the hand menu. I like the hand menu a lot.
I think we will do quite a different one because if I understand correctly, Fabian, your research into different knuckles and so on shows what is more possible and what is less possible. So I also very much strongly want a hand menu, but we should make it based on our experience of what we learned last year somehow. What do you think, Fabian?
I would argue beyond the experience of last year, because if we redo
Yes.
the menu of last year, we're not learning anything. It has
Exactly.
to be this plus whatever, something crazy.
Yes. On that point, Fabian, that's really important. So as Tom Standage, he was saying that direct neural links will be the next big thing. And I got, of course, quite annoyed with him. It turns out he meant direct neural links plus this. So let's say you do something with a gesture, but you also have a thought that can modify the gesture. So we have it with a keyboard in here, as you've implemented. You hold on a thing on a keyboard. So yes, a hand menu that only shows the commands, as we have last year, was great. I think it's one of the best things we did last year. But now, absolutely, it should be, yes, we use a hand menu, but in a much richer way. Am I saying the right things, Fabian?
So what would be the richer way?
Well, first of all, the original kind of hand menu that we couldn't implement last year, you could actually touch fingers and it would be recorded, so you could execute things without even looking at it once you get used to it. That would be one richer way. Yeah, see you later, Dini. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
I was just touching my finger. Sorry.
Oh, okay, good.
So this, for example, I've implemented that, but it's not really reliable because I think Bendel mentioned it last time, because there was some assumption about the average hand for privacy reason, that they don't have the right, they don't have your actual hand size in the headset, even though they could, but they make average hand-ish. So this one is fine. This one is usually, or those ones are usually not what it's possible to do. And I'll show you. You should, I probably didn't send you the link for it, but it's testable. And you will see that basically some of those are not hitting as often as you would want to, because specifically when you touch, you have the sensation of touch. And here you will not touch and it will touch, or you will touch and it won't be registered as a touch. So it's very frustrating. What we can do is expand then that interaction zone, but usually again it feels off. But I'll share a link so that you can try it and we can decide indeed on where to go there, knowing that we do have some new capability, like for example the interaction within a sphere or a box, or also like using a keyboard as a modifiers, and then maybe it would only be in that instance of composing.
Briefly, that brings up the really powerful thing that we've talked about that hasn't been highlighted enough, and that is that certain interactions, no, don't go, Dini, just a few seconds, that certain interactions are only possible, certain gestures are only possible in certain locations. Like if you go inside a cube, suddenly this can mean something, outside it doesn't, right? That means, because Dini, it's so important because you're here, what you're doing with the Next by having the specific actions for the specific objects in your virtual, to be able to encode the affordances of the objects in the objects themselves and have them change as a separate part from the environment, doesn't happen in the real world. It's so spatial scaffolding concerned. It's just super exciting. And I'm wondering if we can do something like that with hands also. That was it, Dini.
Hope so. I hope so. All right, everybody.
Yeah, bye.
And Frodo, I'll be in touch with you about Sunday. All right.
Send the calendar.
I will. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
I'm listening. I'm just going to carry the machine up. It's getting cold down here.
Yeah, on this specific thing, aspect of, for example, pinching a specific knowledge object that would have a specific behavior. You need to provide me use case or usages of what object, what it would look like, and what would be the thing when we pinch on it. Because if you remember, when the text became green or red or whatnot, those were abstract example of this.
Yes.
They were not great example precisely because I did not think in terms of use case, more in terms of what is technically feasible. It is technically feasible now. So what I would really appreciate is indeed some use case or example that without adding any code, just to clarify, how to demo that, basically how to show it so that knowledge workers, when they want to author in XR, it's like, oh, this feature is useful, like dropping a knowledge object in an area or not, or pinching it because of its own type. So thus it has a type. Then I can do more or whatever. Because again, I did not honestly, quite often it happens that I implement a feature with a use case in mind. But by the time I finish implementing it, I don't even remember why I started to implement it.
Yes.
And thus, when it's time to demo it, I show you a cube that drops on the floor and you're like, so what? And that's when we need to basically step back a bit and like, okay, it was because, I don't know, we were discussing about how to organize the physical room and there was something on the floor. I have no idea what, but yeah,
Well,
that happens sadly often.
I think the devlog will help for that. So, question. Am I right understanding that selecting things in XR, so that I have now selected this object and I'm doing other things, that's a difficult thing technically?
What do you mean by selecting an object?
So let's say I have a cube in front of me and I have selected it through some means. Now the system knows that that is like on a computer. Let's say it's clicked on once. Then I do a gesture or something separate, and an action happens to that cube.
No, it's that difficult. I've done it in the past. Basically, to give you a bit of behind the scene is you select an object. So let's say mug or cube or whatever, mug. You pinch it and you leave it there. So for the show, I'll put it down on my desk. But and then you have another thing, let's say an instruction that say transform the last picked object to pink. And then when you execute it, because the last pink object was this becomes pink.
Okay, so last selected object, or last touched object, or last
Yes.
pinched object.
Yes, that became the selection basically. We
Okay.
could have a visual for it, we could have other things, but basically this happened in the past, so I know it's feasible.
So are there any hand gestures that are reliable? As in finger gestures?
Well, a hand gesture, the example I think I gave on the
Yeah, I mean touching a finger.
yeah, you would have to try the one I gave in the video. When was it? The last video I put in the chat, like the hand vertically up within that sphere. That was pretty reliable. But yeah, you'd have to try.
Okay. Right.
Touching. Yeah, I don't know. Because maybe if it's not the same hand, I think those one will be reliable. But this one, or even those ones, the three based on those last three fingers, I'm not convinced.
Okay, so let's see if we can take your developer hat up for a minute so you don't get too stressed. Let's think about this wow moment in terms of interaction. It's probably going to be related to showing or following connections or expanding or collapsing something, right? What do you think? In terms of an interaction for an academic. You're muted, maybe even on purpose.
No, I am muted on purpose. Yeah, it's for me as an academic. I'm not an academic, so.
Well, okay, so I'm wondering, I don't know if anyone is joining us today now, but so the thing is,
To be honest, sorry to interrupt, but that's why I give the demo. It's precisely because I'm not legitimate on this. I will not be by the time we finish this work. So thus, yeah, well, I'm fishing for idea there.
Right. So at this point, that's exactly what we're doing. We are feeding inspiration and fishing for specific ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a powerful. Oh, here's Peter. Very good. Let me just check if Mr. Mark is coming.
Good morning from brunch.
Good morning, Peter.
Well, I guess you'll do a little summary for it. So for a minute, I'll do a small break and I'll be back.
Okay. Yeah, let me just wait 30 seconds, see if Mark is joining us. And then either way, I'll do a summary.
Well, we have the sun out. It's finally looking a little bit like spring.
Yeah, I'm here too. I'm sitting outside today. I can't believe it.
And 45 Fahrenheit. Light breeze. Deer frolicking in the backyard.
Sounds very good. Mr. Anderson is here. Great. We are a quorum. Dini is in some fancy thing happening in the United Kingdom. And so Dini and Fabian had a bit of a going through a few things. So what we've done is we're working on the demo. We've done some normal suggestion for questions while people are in the demo, all of that good stuff. And now we're working on one thing that we really, really want to go through with you guys, which is the key thing, which is after people have gone through the demo, different steps, and we're talking about now doing a demo with the person, not people doing it by themselves. Actually, a bit of context. When I gave the demo to Jesse, most of it was, can you touch that thing? Can you twist it? Really boring stuff to watch, but had to be done. And then at the end, I said, well, can you think of what you might want to do in here? And suddenly she got thoughtful, and it was very good. And as we very well know, when you're in the headset, the way the headset potential is very different from when you're outside of it. So therefore, we want to design a space, room, step, whatever we call it, that at the end of this demo, they are inside, where we ask them questions like, what could you imagine doing here? And some of those highfalutin questions. In order to do that, and we must remind ourselves that right now, we're not trying to design the perfect academic authoring environment. We're at a stage where we're trying to do something that is usefully impressive so that the subject can come up with ideas for, oh, well, I would really need to be able to do this. So that is why we talked a little bit about a wow moment, and not a CG special effect wow moment. Probably some sort of an interaction. It could be, for example, a really cool way to see academic connections, or it could be a really cool way to expand and contract from reading to seeing in context. So that's where we're at. And Fabian has a yellow hand up.
I think we need to be a little bit cautious with that last step /room/space part of the demo, that it doesn't become a postponement of our hope, and that the last step of the demo is the demo, right? I think it should be like inspiring and maybe summarizing what had happened before. But if the last step of the demo is authoring in XR, then we're basically postponing and squeezing that till the end, and I don't think that's the case.
Sorry, I didn't present that very well. I just wanted to say that interaction they should have done earlier, absolutely. But in the final room, that is what's left. A lot of the things are not there, but there isn't a lot of things to think about. It's very basic. So that key thing that was shown earlier is now still there for them to see or do. Mark, sorry, I'm going to have to lock something down. I can still hear you.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Just so I'm sort of, in sync with everything. Does this, if I read the rest correctly, I'm not saying we're pivoting, but I take it we're not trying to finish the annotated bibliography sort of demo anymore. We still use the info. I only ask so that I'm sort of, that's the approach I have. Everything that's been suggested makes eminent sense, and I'm anyway. Peter and I are sort of, in a sense, external to this. But is that your understanding, Fabian?
We're not dropping that, but Fabian, please go ahead.
No, it wasn't to address this, but as far as I know, we're not dropping.
Okay.
To me, we're not dropping anything. We throw a bunch of threads in every direction whenever it sticks, because it's both implementable.
Yeah.
Firework is a bit much, but cool. Whenever it's implementable and it hooks because somebody is interested in it, we go on and we fish more, but we throw other threads in other direction. So to me, that's still valuable. It's not also because something doesn't progress that it's stopped. So don't think of it that way. And it's something that is a little bit Um, Inherent to the process, it's a little bit chaotic. It depends on the discussion of the day, the mood, the weather. Usually, it's a little bit out there.
Okay, that's cool. And there wasn't, there was no sort
Not
of disappointment or something behind my question. That all makes sense to me. One other point I just throw in was actually sort of prompted by actually Fred sent me a text something, but something I reflect on from Monday, which I'll just sort of park in the chat so we can think about it. Is one reflection I really had listening to everyone is that most people, and for quite understandable reasons, seem to be talking about very, very different things when we were all talking about the same thing. I raise this because I think it's a challenge for the project to say that of all these possible worlds, they're all fine, but the thing that our perception of what we're doing is X, simply so that any judgment that or assessment that needs to be made is done from the right perspective. Otherwise, I think we stand into danger, not through anyone's ill intent, of people essentially assessing what we've done through the wrong lens and then getting confused. So it's just something to think about as we come towards the end of the project.
Well, Mondays are very open, and if something there goes completely against everything we're doing, that's totally fine. But,
Okay, I mean,
I do agree with you very much, Mark. We need to declare separately what we're doing in the appropriate way so that there isn't that confusion.
Yeah. I mean, I think. Sorry, Fabian. So I do see your hand up. Just to round out this point that I don't think. I mean, I'm definitely not suggesting that we sort of cover anything off, but it's probably worth actually just emphasizing when these things come up that there are a number of really quite different perceptions. So, for instance, when people were talking about, say, the cube, to some people they were very focused on the shape, the sort of texture of the thing. They didn't seem to see it at all as essentially the interaction device. I mean, my understanding is that it's the working name for effectively the, as it were, the info panel / editing panel for the selected object in the space, as sort of as simply as I can put it. And it doesn't matter if it isn't, but I think that's one of the things that I'm still slightly confused about, because that's why I sort of made the diagram I did the other day, because I'm still trying to put together, there's this sort of editing thing, and there's everything in the space, and I still don't know how the two go together.
Fabian, do you mind if I address that? Oh, you're muted. Great. That means I can. Okay. We have problems here, and that is key what you're talking about. One thing that I think we're getting close to is that we need to see a small thing together with many other things in some sort of a configuration, spatial hypertexts, citation map, whatever. Separately, we need to be able to make one thing into a size and shape whereby we can really interrogate it, like reading a paper, but hopefully more spatialized. So that's the transition we partly talked about on Monday. Now, one problem we still have is, what is the difference between someone else's knowledge object / paper and your own? Like, what is the equivalent of a PDF and a Word document? So, because you're talking about authoring space. Currently, all the design seems to be, when you open something up, your authoring space and the other thing, it's exactly the same, except yours is editable. So I think that addresses your question by saying, I agree with that as still a question.
Yeah, I think it's probably a matter of us starting to just write some of these things down, even if we then change them, in the sense that I'd agree. I mean, the way I sort of understand it, and I may be totally wrong, is that you have N knowledge objects in your space, your environment, because you chose to put them there, or if you're in a collaborative space, maybe somebody else did, but they are the objects in play, as it were. And what we've been sort of looking at is what happens when you examine / edit one of those. It's a separate question as to whether we possibly have more than one in edit at the time. There are some issues, I think, associated with that, but we can. I suspect it's a good idea to just start with one before we do that. I see your hand, Fred. I just let me round this out. So, yeah, and I'm not particularly worried as to when I say so edit. I mean, I also have the conception there's nothing to say that you couldn't, in a sense, conceptually have just say, I want to start a new knowledge object that is, bar any scaffolding, essentially empty, because I'm going to write something based on the other information in the space. And this is why the relationship of the two come together. Anyway, sorry, back to you.
No, don't be sorry. This is the absolute key question. I'm going to pause this discussion because Fabian has his hand up. But Mark, I acknowledge that this is something we need to properly spend time on.
I mean, it's up to you. You can dive deeper into this because I'm not directly addressing that. So you can wait a bit more. Up to you.
Okay, well, I'll just address it as a question that I think we should all think about and write. I think about this to the point of my hair falling out. I'm a little more relaxed. I think we have more of a shape of what we're working on now, but I still have absolutely no idea, Mark. So your sketch was very, very useful because I had focused down on one thing and you quite literally put it in context. But I still don't know the difference between an editable, your own manuscript, and a knowledge piece that's been published in terms of how it's presented to the user.
Well, if I can put a suggestion there, I mean, so in my mind's eye, from a sort of the hypertextual standpoint I tend to come from, is I don't see a difference. The knowledge object is merely a thing, literally a dot in space presented. I mean, it's a thing in the space. It's presented in whatever way we want that object to present, and that might be controlled by something. They might all be the same. There might be text, there might be shapes, there might be a mix. It doesn't really matter. They are whatever they are. They actually are a visual proxy, however they're shown, for a whole lot of information behind. Some have more information, some have less information, some are complete, some are incomplete. Maybe if you're making a new one, it'll be empty. But in that sense, the knowledge object is a quite basic primitive. It just has the information it has. In that sense, I don't think the thing that you're looking at in what we're calling the cube is any different, except one of the objects, at least one of the objects in the space, is now being explored. Basically, the information hidden in that tiny dot in space is being expanded in a way that you can more meaningfully interact with it. What it does mean, where I think the disconnect does occur is that when we start talking about, well, we're going to look at this thing and then we're going to draw other views, say like a timeline. Well, the timeline is based on what? Information that only exists in that knowledge object, or are we talking about all the knowledge objects? And I think if it's all, then it probably shouldn't happen in the cube because it's a matter of context. If it applies to all things, it wants to, in a sense, not be generated in the context of one thing. But I'm happy to be wrong with that. Thanks.
Just really briefly, Mark, there has to be a difference between a PDF and a Word document in this space, right? When you publish an academic document, it is coherent, self-sufficient, and in the world. It is frozen. You can't publish an academic document that's editable by the author at any point, obviously, right?
Well, I think that's perhaps being unintentionally absolutist about it. The point is, it has the information it has. Now, obviously, if it's a knowledge object that represents something that is essentially a fixed thing, then you won't or you shouldn't be able to edit the. Hi there. You shouldn't be able to edit the things that shouldn't be editable. But one of the things we've talked about is we want to make annotations to it. So absolutely, it should be annotated. We have to.
Do
you see why they're not different? It's just a knowledge object. If certain features are locked, or if it's a Word document, it might have a different icon. But they're just knowledge.
No, they are different. In the same way that you cannot give ACM a Word document and have them publish that because once an institution has published something, its name is behind it. It can't just then randomly be edited. It has to be frozen. Of course.
That's what I said. I said that you wouldn't be able to say, for instance, you wouldn't be able to edit, say, the main text of the paper if it was a published object.
Okay, I'm not
but
sure.
They're not different. There is no different. Okay. It just means that some fields, some of the knowledge object is locked for things where it should be locked. But there's no other difference beyond that.
Okay, Mark, there is a difference between your own notebook and a published object.
Why?
The published.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be sort of argumentative. I'm interested.
Okay, I'll try to answer it. when I am writing something or anybody else writing, I need to be able to do whatever I want with what I'm writing. But when I'm reading Peter's paper that was published in the ACM Hypertext Journal, I should not be able to make changes and send it back to the other people and pretend that it's Peter's. But I should
But
be
you
able
can't,
to,
it's not.
hang on. I should be able to do annotations on top of it. I should be able to do highlights. I should be able to write on the back. Of course I should. But of course there is a separation between the authoring system, whether it's LaTeX or Word or Pages or Author or AI Writer or Scrivener or whatever, and a published piece of knowledge. Why is that something that's we're slightly discussing? I'm not sure how that's different.
Because it's simply, they're both knowledge objects. You're talking about one where certain parts of it are locked because you
You
shouldn't.
can't. One, you need to be able to cite. You can
Yes,
only
but that's
cite an
information.
immutable object. You cannot cite something that can keep changing, right?
Well, it doesn't keep changing. It's
Mark,
difficult.
can we have this discussion offhand?
Yeah.
Offline?
I mean, well, perhaps somebody else can explain my confusion or explain
Fabian
what
and
I'm
Peter,
doing.
can
I'm
you
misunderstanding.
explain to me how?
You're muted, Frode.
I was just requesting that you or Fabian maybe explain to me how we don't need to have the equivalent of a published non-changeable object versus your own personal writing. To me, it seems clear, but Mark and I seem to be off. Maybe someone can help us with the language to understand each other.
Okay, let me try to take a shot at this. There are a couple things we might be starting to conflate here. There's the knowledge object in the sense of a conceptual entity that is going to exist and evolve over time versus artifacts that are derived from it. A Word document, as it gets picked up by a publisher, is an artifact derived from that knowledge object. It is bound to the object state at the point in time that it was stamped final and dispatched. There should be an ability, well, like in law, we call it shepherdizing, where you'd look at a case and you'd have access to a database of things that subsequently modify it. So I can take a case and I can shepherdize the case and basically ask the legal database, tell me everything that cites it, and also flag anything that cites it in a critical fashion, as opposed things that are citing it simply to incorporate a definition that it contains within it, versus a citation that says, no, that prior decision was completely wrong and it's no longer good law. And we even have like little robots in AI systems that stick little fancy warning icons on cases that are no longer good law, so that we know that the artifact that we're looking at has subsequently been refuted or has some other major issue associated with it. The other thing we found in law is that there's more than one concept and assertion that gets packaged together in an artifact. So, for instance, a case has multiple issues that are determined in that case. So even though the case is refuted somewhere, the case might not be refuted with respect to the issue that I care about in the case. So therefore, you want to be able to reach in and have the database system say on, point number 3, let's just shepherdize point number 3 and disregard everything that's extraneous. And all this makes me think that what we really want to be doing here is decoupling the artifact from the interface affordances that we use to manipulate the artifact. And we should really maybe invest just some time at a purely abstract level, forget for a moment what is easy to do in the headset with the programming language we have, and let's just see and work on conceptually what functionality are we going to need out of the system. Then we can worry about how to map that onto an interface affordance, which also means it'll be easier for us down the road to swap out an interaction for another interaction. The interactions we can be developing from the bottom up, leveraging what we find available in the libraries that we have at our disposal to build WebXR things, and that can be operating independently from our working on what we want to do at the conceptual level, how the documents should be related to each other, what kinds of functionality I want a system. Well, at a purely abstract level, I want basically the equivalent of a 3D tinderbox, where I can pick two entities within the environment, put a typed link between them.
Peter, this is important and useful, but do we not want to draw the distinction between published and private? If I'm writing something in my software author, and I have that while I'm doing research, it is different from something someone else has published. Once it's published, it is locked in
Well,
stone. You should be able
like
to
I said,
access the data behind it.
I think, again, this is the distinction I was trying to put in earlier of the idea of the artifact versus the research entity that's attached to. So the research entity is an evolving thing. It represents, my line of research on topic X. More than one research entity can be crossed together to create an artifact. So the artifact could be attached to more than one line of research. So one thing you have conceptually is your line of research, say, I'm looking at World's Fairs. I have another line of research where I'm looking at prototype cities of the future. The two cross over with something like the Futurama exhibits at the New York World's Fair. I'm also looking at Disney as an entity as a line of research, and that crosses the World's Fairs, where Disney helped to develop some of the pavilions that appeared at the fairs. So we have
But Peter,
lines of thought.
hang on. I hear what you're saying, but when you're in this knowledge space, is it controversial to say that some of the things are published by other people and one is a new thing that you're constructing yourself? Shouldn't there be a difference? Otherwise, you can't save it. You still need some sort of a document.
The artifact is what's published versus, in other words, you have the research space, the evolving knowledge space, which is mutable, and then you have immutable snapshots of it in the form of the artifacts. And I think that's the distinction we need. Immutable pieces of it versus the mutable element, and a way in an immutable element to reference the possibility of future mutations. So in the frozen Word document, that's a fixed thing. The particular version of the PDF that gets picked up and published by ACM, you can have a link that is essentially a reference to a live query that at some point in the future, the system would be able to use to hook it in to the knowledge graph, which is in a constant state of flux. So it's a very useful distinction, but the thing is, the artifact is immutable, and it can have queries in it, which are an immutable frozen query.
Sure.
The results of that query could even be, attach a timeline to it. Imagine you say we have a timeline slider. We have an immutable query saying, give me everything. I talked about this, and then we could slide the slider
Peter,
a month after publication to a year after publication.
Peter, of course, you should be able to attach these types of things, but when you are working, you do need somewhere to write your ideas down, right?
Right, and that's in the mutable evolving knowledge graph realm.
Okay. What did you say, Mark?
I'm just conscious Fabian has his hand up. Do you want to, before we sort of whiz past, I think I see what's happening. It's a matter of how literally one takes things. If I take 5 things off my hard drive, say your library, if you find it easier to think in those terms, some might be published papers, some might be things I'm working on. When I take them into the environment, they are just globs of data that are proxy for an actual document behind it. They are not the actual document.
No. You should absolutely be able to, in the Excel environment, have native objects that do not exist on your laptop. This should be possible to create a new.
Well, in that case, you're making a new object, which is going to start as an empty object because it will have some data because I know where it is in space. No, that's fine. But it's the same. I'm saying it's the same data primitive. Just think of it as a bit like your unpacked cube. It's just an enormous spreadsheet of information. What it looks like and what you can do to it depends on what it knows about itself. Now, if I make a knowledge object of a published article, it needs to know when I bring it into the space that it represents a published article. And therefore, for instance, I can't edit the text, the body text of that object because it's a published article. I can make
Yes.
annotations, which I may
Yeah,
choose to
but
store
Mark,
in
we
another
complete, we
knowledge object and link to it.
Mark,
But
we
this is the
completely,
point. They're not this, they are the same things. They're knowledge in the
okay.
environment, they're knowledge objects. And I think that's where the confusion arises, because otherwise we get down the rabbit hole of things
Okay.
trying to be different that don't need to be.
Mark, on a normal computer, when you look at an icon on your desktop, it's not there. It is something you click on to open data. It could be on the cloud, it can be in your hard drive, and you don't know what part of the hard drive. Of course, things that you see and interact with a headset or on a screen, it isn't the thing. It's referring to other things. Absolutely agree with you. But in terms of the user experience, there is something that you are authoring, and there is source stuff.
Yeah, but you have
You
to
cannot-
know, I understand that, but you need to know. I mean, the point is the system, the environment should signal to you that these are different.
Yes,
But
and
they're
that is
still
the
just
point.
knowledge
But
objects
Mark,
within the
that
environment.
is what we're trying to establish. We're trying to establish what is the interaction, visually and otherwise, that the user can know. This is the thing that I'm authoring. These are the sources I'm authoring partly from. If you make
Okay.
a new object in the knowledge environment to author into or around or whatever, there needs to be an interaction to make that thing exist. And it should ideally give different affordances, more affordances than the references that you have to other knowledge objects that you can see, right?
I'd agree.
Right.
Yeah, totally. That's
Okay.
what I've been saying.
Yeah, but it took us half an hour to say that. But
Well,
we need, hang on, Mark, we need to find a way, a method, a language and interaction in this environment to make that immediately clear to the user. It's one of the things we haven't done yet.
Right. If I may, I think what's happening here is we're bouncing. We're getting caught up on two things. There's the visual layer, how you tell, how you can something signals to you, how the system signals to you that this thing is not that thing, that this object and that knowledge object are both knowledge objects, but they are different things, and you may do different things for them. Within a sense, the reality of what those objects are, because that actually is important too, because it gives you that list of those things. So
okay.
I think the thing is to deconflict the two. So one is literally about visual styling. So it's no different to being in Finder and saying, okay, I want all the things that have an Acrobat logo to now have a Word logo. And that's fine, and that's declarative and it indicates something. Or you might have further things that
right.
effectively read only as opposed to word only. But I'm not sure how that necessarily changes what the knowledge object is underneath, because it's still going to need the same broad affordances. Just in some cases you can't edit, in some cases you can.
Mark, yes. We need to figure out a way for the user to know that. Yes, the analogy between Word and PDF is 100%. One you can do certain things with, the other one you can do almost anything with.
So why isn't okay? But you talked about icons, a visual representation. Are you saying we need something more than an icon?
We don't have an icon. We don't have a visual representation that differs your manuscript thing from the other knowledge object things yet. Something we need to develop.
Well, there are two parts to that. There's one is, in a sense, in a sense, you might say there's the mechanical part of that, i.e. in the space, how the object displays its identity. And the other part, it seems to me, is a taxonomy of what those identities are going to be. And those are two sort of separate things. So one is just a box in, a part of space. I'm not sure this is what I've been saying for months, if not years, so I'm not quite sure what's changed. But the objects are all objects. They appear differently because their icons are different, because what they know about themselves means they display differently. I don't think that should be controversial.
I don't understand what rabbit hole we're in right now. I'm not saying that's controversial. I'm saying that
maybe
we're talking about this is 7 hypertexts displayed as a gloss. This is where I'm writing my paper for ACM Hypertext 2025. Right? Currently, we haven't made a difference between them. We need to do that. That's all I'm saying. The user needs to see and interact with them slightly differently. We agree on this. I'm not sure why it keeps going into, yeah, but they're objects, they're objects. This is an object, this is an object. Currently, we haven't differentiated them. We should probably do that. Fabienne, I'm sure you have a good step.
I have excellent stuff for us to shout about, but it's kind of unrelated. It's to go back because it's a very old hand. It was about the last step of the demo. It's kind of a warning that the last step of the demo, whatever the exciting gesture or interaction is,
Fabienne, I'm going to take the computer inside. I'll be listening, but I'll be moving around. I'm sorry, it's getting cold.
Yes, don't get cold. That's at least my expectation, which might be off from everybody else, is that the demo is like stepping inside a river, so you don't step in the same river twice. So namely that once we've done a demo to a couple of people, we're not going to give the same demo to a couple of other people. We might do a few, but once that's been either validated or invalidated, which is open-ended, and maybe we need 500 people, maybe we even need one, and that's fine. But it also means that the final demo exciting gesture in March, or I guess we're in April already, in April is not going to be the same as in July. Does it make sense? Yeah. That was it, because it's not, again, like set in stone. So we will have record of it, like videos and discussions and whatnot, but because it's moving.
The point of this final demo room is related to that. It's 100% that. And it is partly an inspiration for us to think of the really enthralling interaction that people can do. Right? It's supposed to help. Sorry, I'm just moving to my office here. It's supposed to boil down, and of course it should change. No question about that. We shouldn't be stagnant on this. It's just the notion that, for instance, one thing I could imagine is what we talked about on Monday. So there's nothing else. It's very plain, but you have these small things. Let's keep using the term knowledge object that represents sources. And you can maybe, through gestures, rearrange them, like Disney's Fantasia or Minority Report, something amazing. You do something with your hands and suddenly they do this or that. That could be very inspirational. The only other thing I'm thinking about currently is what we really talked about on Monday, which was, imagine you grab one of these things with your fist, and it's in your fist now, and you open your fist, and suddenly you have a large representation of what that is. Maybe it's even a JPEG now. Maybe it's not even proper data for the sake of argument. And when you're done, you collapse it back down. I just want someone to be able to feel that they can see more and do more. And hopefully, Fabienne, it will change many, many times. Absolutely, completely agree with you. And in terms of Mark and my long discussion now, with loving respect to both of us, it's completely relevant, right? Because we will have to do intelligent things in dealing with that discussion. But I just remember Jessie changing at the end of it, when she was just standing there with the cards. And I said, okay, the cards are very simple, but just move them. And she was doing this for a while. And for her, and also for me earlier, it's just like, wow. It is the most obvious thing you can do in XR, but it's also one of the most wow. So that's why my current thought is basically, let's have a room that is the cards, not the lines of text, nothing else. And all you can do, it goes back to what you did in America, Fabienne. All you can do is move those things about, because it really helps people fiddle. It's almost like Lego while thinking. Of course, we should go beyond that. But as an initial thing of, what do you think of the environment? What are you dreaming about? and you can see in Fiddle.
Can't we move things at the moment? I thought. I mean,
Oh, this is not adding, Mark. This is removing. It's saying simplifying the room for the end. So this is exactly where we can. Yes, 100%.
So the fact that the items turn up in a list or whatever is just the initialization thing. And obviously,
Yes.
I would imagine if you were working in an actual space over time, it would develop an order of its own. Okay, but so if I understand you correctly, what we're now talking is effectively a way you want to query the space, and you say, I want all the I want all the Word documents up this end and all the PDFs up the other, for a very simplistic reason. Or I want the editable things over here, and I want the non-editable things. So in other words, you're essentially doing some form of query over the knowledge objects in the image space, which is why I get back to the point that it's the information that the object knows about itself, which is really disjoint from what we color it. And a really cool part that I raised before is, well, we could do that. Or we could say, well, I'm not going to move them, but what I will do is I'm going to change the icons, or I'll hint the icons in a different way, so that I can say, oh, right, so these ones are read only, they're things, and these are things, or here are all the annotations. How you do that, I don't know, because normally in most 2D systems, that's the bit where you start sort of typing, because you have got to have an understandable conversation with the software, which in this case is the XR environment, so it knows, it understands your intent. I don't think we're quite at the stage yet where we can speak that. I can see it happening in the future, but I don't think we're quite like that now. Fabian?
It's simpler than that, but Fabian, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think just the idea of querying the space, I don't remember hearing that before, so I think it's very interesting. It also loops a little bit back to the discussion we started with Frode just before you two arrived, namely that right now there is a mechanism where you pick a line of code or text and you drop it, it becomes green. It's just a silly way to say that this object has a kind of type, which is text or code. It could be the same for any primitive or any knowledge object. It also means we need to actually give them types, and then we can have behaviors so that when something happened to them, like picking them or dropping them within a certain volume, then something else happened to it. But in terms of querying, that is indeed what we have to, I think, honestly, spend more time thinking about and tinkering, because individually moving the piece of, let's say, those cards for the bibliography, that is interesting. But at some point, if you need that to scale, you need to indeed query. And that means, for example, sorting by year or whatever. So I would suggest to actually dedicate one of the sessions soon to that topic, like querying in space, querying through space, like based on either gesture or position or where you drop it, and the necessary infrastructure for this in terms of, let's say, objects having types, or what kind of filter we do. Because honestly, I think in terms of code, most of it, in order to do this kind of thing, is there, but we need kind of a couple of competing use case with a couple of example that makes sense. And I think starting from the bibliography and the cards would probably make sense. For example, a simple query like sorting by year and doing a selection within this of a couple of cards, and then applying something to those cards. And I think that would be, for our audience, I think, probably, hopefully interesting, useful even.
Okay. That was exciting. I got my hand up. Good. So here's the thing. There's a lot. Okay. I have a specific thing for you there, Fabian, but in terms of the point of this final room, it may not even be one, right? It's just, when we're asking questions, what do they see? It's a simple thing, but it's also a bit of a provocation to us. Now, Fabian, you said something much more interesting. We've talked about timeline in different ways and so on, and we talked about hands. I could only hear part of what you said. I had to go around the corner. But so if I am saying what you already said, slap me when you see me. But this would be amazing, right? You enter the room with the cards, nothing else, none of the lines of text, no nonsense. So, we tell the user first, okay, move them around as you can. And I have some notes, design notes on how to slightly change that. There's a weird angle thing, little details, who cares? They do that. And now you tell the user, look below you, you have 4 spheres. like semi-transparent circles in front of you, for the sake of argument. Put your hand inside and twist. And suddenly, whatever you've done is now twisted into a timeline, right? This is only a provocation for us to think, but the notion is you do something freehand, and then through a special safe gesture, you can actually change the ordering of it, or maybe even rotate them, or just do a thing that just gives you the sense of, I cannot do this on my computer. This is spatial, right? Because it's huge. We can do things like even, because, okay, so Mark and Peter, we've talked more about the notion we talked about on Monday, where, let's say, if you do this gesture, right, just at any time, the system may have all kinds of issues. But if you do it only inside a cube or a sphere or some specifically known place, it'll interpret it in a specific way, right? So one of them was you hold around a cube and you do this and it becomes tiny. But if you do it just generally in space, nothing happens. In other words, the affordance, the gesture, has validity only in known places. So that is why, you know, the whole, if you're doing a movie, you can do whatever the hell you want because you don't have to worry about gesture clash and things, right? So if we take, because Marcus brought up the timeline again today, and you did, Fabienne, which is
Sorry,
so
but
exciting.
to interrupt,
No, I will go on forever. You have to interrupt.
Yes, I must for the greater good, because I'll share my screen to show
For
the
the
video.
greater good.
I will show a video to show what you said, at least for the recording, because otherwise I think it's conceptually understandable, but it's a little bit tricky. And because we do have demo for this, so I guess you can see my screen now. So you have the sphere, you do the vertical hand gesture, nothing happens. But if you do that gesture within that sphere, which is visible, then the cube snaps to the wrist, right? That's what you were describing, wasn't it? And you can still like pinch outside, you can still like do the normal gestures on top of.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, but I need to include this inside so that for the recording, for the video, people also actually get that or understand.
No, that's really cool, Fabienne. So these cards that you have in the space, they're based on Mark's JSON, right? So that means that what is written on them is understandable by the environment, right?
Correct.
So that means you can sort them by whatever the heck you want, right?
Well, whatever data is available and sortable, but yes.
So that means we can play around with silly notions of interaction. I mean, one thing we could do, I just said 4 spheres for absolutely no reason. We could have a, we could have, because the whole idea of the specific spatial is you touch the item itself and you do a gesture. The other one is you touch a control area, right? You can imagine you put your hands inside a virtual Iron Man suit or whatever, right? And your hands now can only work in a specific spot. But so would it be interesting, guys, to be able to do different distributions in space? It would, right? Different kind of wide layouts, but using gestures. Wouldn't that be kind of a bit of a eye-opener for people for the potential, maybe?
Yeah, well, if I understand correctly, I mean, the distributions, it goes back to what sort of well, you can fake them completely, but essentially it goes back to you're going to ask, you're going to do a query on the data that is in the environment. And one of the things I just suggest in the side channel is, if it will help Fabian, if you want me to put some extra fields into the current JSON demo, just so we've got a sort of, a constant test piece, just let me know, because yes, but to me, I mean, yes, you can do distributions, but the interesting, the wow part is in a sense understanding what you might do. The gesture is less wowish to me, because it's what you'll have to do to make it happen. It's what happens as a result, and what can happen, as Fabian's pointed out, is entirely constrained by the information that's actually in the space.
Well, that
never goes away, even if we fake it.
No, I completely don't have a problem with that. I mean, it's not like you just do a gesture and, who cares what happens? Absolutely. I'm just going to share my camera here to go further on what
Fabienne was talking about. That's not what I want. This one. Can you see me now? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Right. So, where are the beautiful cards? Reference cards.
You know, there is an anchor, so you can jump directly to that demo if you want, even on that page of the demos.
Okay. Right, so here we are. So first thing I'm suggesting is get rid of the instructions in the back, all of this text, maybe even the title, and maybe this. And also these, as we've discussed, right? Because this, if we can have a way for them to, let's say we work a little bit on the actual display, so they're actually useful. So we don't show everything up front. We show maybe the title and author, whatever it might be. Then they can start doing a rough kind of spatial kind of organizing, right? So we agreed that that is cool and useful. And please speak to me if you have something to say. I can't see you, of course. Now, this is amazing in and of itself. We really shouldn't ignore that. But if we do this slight design, make it more readable, and Mark, you say often, and thank you for saying it, that there's kind of the going from structured to loose, like this way. So imagine if I now could do a gesture like, let's say I pull something out, some whatever gesture, who cares, right? And it now arranges on a timeline, but I can undo that and then go back to this. So I can choose different dimensions to make this spatialize, but I always have my saved manual one as well. Isn't that the kind of thing that would help people understand that this is a different kind of space? It's not just a flat screen, maybe?
Yes, I'm sorry. I mean, yes, it is interesting, useful to do. It's not very. I mean, I'll pick my words carefully. When I say it's not very innovative, I'm not trying to be negative, but I mean that's nothing unusual. You can do that easily now in lots of knowledge tools. So that's something you do routinely working on information. The difference here is simply that we're doing it in a constructed 3D space. One of the questions becomes, it's a bit like the McLuhan thing. So what is this making better, or how are we doing it in XR in a way that adds something to something you do essentially in a box on a 2D screen? And again, that's not meant to sound glass half empty at all. It's sort of, I mean, I think to me, one of the things is that one thing you can do in XR that you can't do with a sort of flat screen is you can't go, for instance, and stand in the middle of the thing. Or in the sense, you can actually literally alter your perspective on it, or you can go and stand, you can sort of...
Yeah, but Mark, but then I think we agree very much, because that was literally what I was just doing. I was literally moving things here and also here. So I was in the middle of it. So I think we're very much in agreement.
Yes, the thing is, I'm still wondering what the sort of the wow in this is. So one of the things, I mean, unless it's a completely constructed endpoint, is that because the lynch here is if we can't find a way to signal to the environment what we want to do, we can assume the data's all there, but it's a thing of the signal. And so, I mean, it's interesting. One of the things you're suggesting is, okay, maybe I want a different gesture to do distribution A versus distribution B, because you can bet your bottom dollar it won't be just a timeline or something else. That's just the way, because the thing with the data, you have to follow it where it goes for it to be useful to spend time doing this much effort with it, or else there are quicker and easier tools that exist at the moment.
But Mark, so your focus on the spatiality. Okay, let's really use that. So one of the things that came up early on, actually before this started, was the importance of saving views, right? So imagine if we do something as simple as follows. We have nicely designed cards, like right now they show site key and things they don't need to show. You know, some of it can be hidden. We show only the useful data to indicate, and then it can, another way it can be open. However, what we do, we provide an elegant interaction for, well, first of all, you can already put the cards around. You encourage the user to put in front of them, to the left, to the right. Maybe they don't like cards to the left, whatever it might be. And then we provide a gesture, maybe the hand menu, to save your layout. And then we do another one. And then when we can go back to layout 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, all the cards animate between them. Of course, we can do this in 2D as well, but it really goes to show that you can use memory palace style thinking about your space. You can put things here and there and whatever. You can instantly toggle them.
But hasn't that been possible from the get-go? I mean, I'm confused. I thought you could move them around.
Yeah, of course, we can do that now. I'm saying you can move them around, but what I'm suggesting we do, we add two things. Number one, through a interface in the system, a way to save your layouts. Of course, you can do that. Fabian has demonstrated it. But let's say, for the sake of literally, for the sake of argument, you put things around, and then you look at your hand, and there is a slot 1 is 1 finger. I'm not saying we should literally do, but something like that, saved. And then we say, okay, do another few moveabouts, slot 2. Okay, go back to slot 1, and things reorient, right? But in addition to that, because imagine we're doing something as one of the values you have is time. So what you can do now is a gesture such as this. You pinch your fingers apart, and the cards that represent older documents move away from you. Like they literally fade to the past, just to begin to use the space. Right, so you have your layout, but they move back, and then you can snap them back. Just a few things like that, where they feel they can live in the space of this way. Now, I had lunch with, what? Okay. I had a lunch with Tom Standage yesterday, and he's just ridiculously intelligent. I don't understand how he even wants to spend time with me, which goes for you two as well. And he talked about having no interface or invisible interface, which offends me to an extent, because you're always going to need an interface. But what I learned from the conversation over Thai food that we should all share when you come to London, it's super hot, is what we really meant was without a visualized specific tool interface, right? Without a button, so to speak. And we, you know, like on this device, there is no visual interface anymore. When you do messages, you tap and you scroll by doing this. So we don't have a good enough HCI language for that. But what I'm talking about is, let me just go through and see if you all agree. Okay, full attention for 15 seconds. Number one, we ask the person to do whatever they want. Second, store them and bring back. And then they use the away dimension for moving things that are older further away to see it. Wouldn't that give an indication that this is a spatial environment where you can see things differently, maybe? On the phone, the finger is the button. Yes, exactly, Mark. And this is where the HCI language is poor, because what do we mean by that? But I think we understand without the right language.
One thing that's actually interesting and useful, I think, is you talk about, okay, so in a sense, having saved slots. So I'm thinking, okay, this is nice. There is some coherence here, because essentially, you're talking about view specs. So I've got this environment, I've loaded some stuff, but I also have the ability I've chosen to store as other data within the environment, a number of different layouts, because they have, at least say for me as the person operating the environment, they have some sense, or at least they're a record of where I got to when I was last in the space. It may be, you know, sometimes you're literally just keeping them short term, because, and the nice thing also is it allows you to do investigation on several different axes at once. This is very familiar to me. Sorry, this is the kind of thing I've been doing for 20 years in Tinderbox. So that's good, because that is enriching. The XR part is that you can do it in space. One of the things I'm also mindful of is, of course, we only have a very small data set at the moment. What that's going to look like with a more realistic set, which might be, say, 200 objects, is something to consider. And as Fabien's pointed out, moving 10 objects around, not such a big deal. Moving everyone, or moving at least sort of some of the 200 out of the way or the 1,000 out of the way just to see what you're doing, it will become an issue.
Of course.
So it's something to consider. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So I think what has been introduced here is, I at least have thought of this space as XYZ volume. There is another volume, and Fabienne has been trying to impress this upon me, and I think I finally got it. There is also the central point in the middle of your head, right? So that is why I like the idea of things that are old, push them away. For example, as you're right, Mark, there could be other reasons to push things away, right? So we have a combination of put things where you want them, and then you have a slider of sorts to choose not just X, Y, Z, because they could also go up or down depending on something, but to push them away based on something. Fabienne, what do you think about this specific scenario for card dealing with?
Why not? Why not? We need scenarios. It doesn't. They might. We will learn by trying to make them and seeing if people indeed react to them, and how implementable it is. So yeah, I think it's valuable to explore.
A thought with the cards is perhaps in one of the demos, it would be to have essentially, just doesn't really actually really particularly matter what's on the cards, but have essentially similar underlying objects, but showing slightly different data. What that does, it just visually surfaces what we're talking about. So to a certain extent, the less visually coherent the data set is, it may be more useful, because I think it will, it does two things actually. It reduces the homogeneity. So as just of that, it allows for a degree of serendipity. Oh, right. So these things are birds of a feather, because it's that sort of thing that leads you to say, okay, well, I'll put those over there. Or you might, when we've worked out how to do it, you might essentially ask the environment via a query, say, okay, put all the blue things over there and the green things over there and the white rectangles down there. Because why? Because in the moment, that's what I want to do. So I think thinking through how we might want to just visualize the our specimen data set in one of the demos slightly differently, all pieces from one another, I think might be useful for exploration work.
Yes. Okay, we all have to go in a few seconds, but Fabienne, I'm specifically asking you this in terms of implementation, right? Now, first of all, in terms of selection, it is probably useful to have a category that is something that is not unfolded and that is not what you are authoring yourself. So that means all the sources that are closed would be acted upon through this stuff. In order to have the grammar of choosing what scale and what action, can we do something like you look at your hand and there is date, authors, location, whatever it might be encoded somehow on your hand. So you first choose that. So let's say I tap now not on date, but I choose author name. And then the second thing is, well, what do you want to do with this? So that's when you do some kind of a pulling action through, I'm not saying we have to do this, but some kind of a pulling action, and then it will now be pushed along an axis. But we probably also need to tell it what axis to do, right? So if you wanted to go up or down, let's say we suddenly, for some reason, we're obsessed about sorting by last name. So that's the one we've chosen. Forget timeline. Just now, that's what we've chosen. And I want things to be letters A, B, C closer to me than X, Y, Z. That should be far away. But Mark may decide that what he wants is A, B, C on top and Z at the bottom, right? So we can have very reasonable expectation of what to do that. So we need to find a way to do that. So we can either explicitly say data dimension, and then interaction should be along this or that, or we can have a gesture for that, right? So let's imagine we have, if we want it to be spread out this way, we literally, after saying that, we do this. If we want it up and down, we do this, right? Where it's sorted by the right hand being whatever, or we do this. Does that make sense?
I suggest we find a way to describe this that is not video in terms of, let's say, input gesture, required data, what is the ending of data, state of the data after the gesture. Because some of it honestly is interesting regardless of what the gesture itself is. And when we bind the two together, we're taking risk that the thing doesn't get implemented because the gesture itself sounds cool, but it may be hard to do, or because it's unreliable, basically. But if we have a way to have this either as text or even text pointing to video or drawing with this, then we can more easily iterate and go back to it. I also have to be harsh because I gotta go. So that's also my way to say that's why I need this kind of things. And I think it will be hard to do, to be honest. And that's also why microglyph was interesting. I'll put the link also in the chat, like how to describe gesture.
I'll put it in writing for you with images, but I just wanted, for the sake of whoever's watching the video, you know, you pull along from the axis, and the hand that is stationary versus the hand that is moving actually has meaning. Peter and Mark and I will talk about that for a minute after this.
Really gotta go. Link in the chat. Also, remember that some of the gesture, the difficulty is not the gesture itself, is gesture without a context or with all the other gestures we already have. That's the challenge. Anyway, thanks for everything, everyone. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye, Fabienne.
Bye-bye.
I just have to respond to Fabienne for the video on the first thing. The point of choosing something from your hand or whatever now says the only valid gesture until you cancel or the next thing we're talking about. So it's really, really important that there's a hierarchy. So if you choose timeline, you know, if you do this or that, it can't mean just general stuff. It only refers to timeline. And that, but then we need some way to cancel. Mark, your hand is up.
Yeah, I mean, actually, this is sort of interesting because, so if taking your last point, if you have introduced a mode where you've sort of said right now that the until I sort of indicate the end of it, so it's almost like having a sort of a gestural query. So one of the things you might do in this mode is say, okay, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to indicate the axis. It might be running that way, it might be running fore and aft. So when we get to the point where I've indicated to you that I want, you know, the blue things at one end and the white cards at the other, you know the axis on which I laid out. And that might seem quite natural. The harder bits are going to actually be working out how we gesture or indicate the things that we want altered. But indicating the axis, or another thing might be that you indicate something that basically produces essentially a bar in front of you, which you then manipulate. So in other words, it gives you an axis which you then turn, put in the right direction, and then indicating somewhere that you finish with. So you've now told the environment, the next thing I want you to do, the layout I'm going to ask you to do is going to run along this axis. That's one possible thing, because it seems as though we're talking about the rhetoric or the vocabulary of, I mean, in a sense, what we're edging towards is something I'm not sure it's entirely possible, which is sort of a gestural query language, or using gesture insofar as is possible. Because the main reason you're trying to do this is to avoid having to type something, or having to dive down into some sort of clicky thing. To some extent, it may not be possible. Another thing you could consider in doing this is that if you want to work in a very visual way, you could, one of the things, having indicated the axis, you could have the environment then show you the range of different objects that you have. So, if we have 4 different types of icons, you might select 2 of them. which is saying to it, I only want these two, and I now want them on this axis.
Selection is going to be very, very tricky. I agree with you. So I think that for this demo right here, we're thinking about things that isn't your manuscript and things that aren't open. Because if something's open, you indicate you're reading it. So it's all the closed things, right? But that's a separate. That's a huge issue, Mark. But
actually, there's no reason, given that that as long as you know, for instance, if the thing you've got open is known to be, the system knows it's open, there is nothing to stop it having an object in the space that is clearly in some way, visually identified as being in a sense a selected object, which means that you could still have your unpacked view
I agree.
and have the thing in some sort of distribution, because like as not, you definitely want to see the thing that you're looking at in the close view in the altered context, because one of the reasons you're doing that is to understand the relation.
Yes, a very good point. You should be able to have an open and a small version. Now, the other thing I just wanted to run by you guys is I'm suggesting that when you do this gesture, whatever it might be, it moves things relative to where they are now. So that means that after I put things wherever I want in the space, let's say I now want to do a bit of a timeline pullback, like one example, then when I do that, whatever amount that I do and whatever gesture it is, that's how far they go back. So there isn't a grid for them to snap onto. So let's say I keep faffing about with them. Even if I move them wrongly, and then I do that again, it'll move that further back. The point is, I don't know if that's the best way to do it. But I think this is the kind of situation where we can start experimenting with, should it be global, should it be relative, should it be relative to the object, to your head, all of that stuff.
Probably the best way to look at that would be to make some specimen data that are pertinent to something where you might want to do that.
Yes, and you have that.
This is a problem. I've actually been involved in a conversation elsewhere. It's all about onboarding into a system, and people don't understand it because they keep turning up trying to understand the system without a problem that the system is designed to solve. So they don't know what they're doing. So it's all very complicated. So I think the challenge with making sense of some of these things is we have to bite on the bullet, and even essentially we can make up some data. So we have to think, the next thing is to say, okay, well, why would I want to move? And essentially, I think what you're saying is I'm doing a distribution, but I might want to play with them on a different axis to the distribution axis. So I might, for instance, I might have some things on say, done on time, because we normally know the year, say, of a document. So that's a kind of easy one we know we'll have. But you might say, well, I want to have some of these back here, I want some of them there. It might be because these are the things I've already looked at versus these are the things I haven't looked at in this workspace.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also see your comments, Peter, about using left, right hand. Absolutely. These are the different things we can do. I'm going to try to specify it quite clearly, my perspective. If you want to do it as well, that would be really, really good. So these dev meetings are now going to be logged in a devlog. I've kind of hidden it on the page because it hasn't really happened yet. So you can go and look there. You can check the prompt, see if you agree with it. It should be a lot easier to track things for our future. So that was cool. And thank you very much for today, guys. Anything else before we adjourn till Monday?
Yeah, great session.
All right.
I put you a link in the chat before, so have a look at them when you get a chance.
Okay.
Quick one for you. Deanie will be traveling next Monday, but I should be around because she's scrubbed around Monday. She's going back because when it's all fallen apart, Wendy's cancelled, and that's fine.
Which is super bizarre considering it was all for her benefit, but she's a
in fairness, anyway, I can explain that it's not quite as